Hello class. Today we will be looking at part 3 of chapter 4, which is the last section of chapter 4, 4.9. Talks about distributed loads. So in this case what we're looking at is a reduction of a simple distribution of loading. You can imagine that there is a bundle for some boards or wood that is stored on top of a storage rack. This lumber places a distributed load due to the weight of the wood. So you can imagine that throughout the surface of the rack, there is forces of the weight being distributed all across of it instead of at one certain point. And this weight is distributed on beams holding the bunk. The question is, how do we analyze the load's effect, and how do we analyze all the forces that are acting across the steel beam? In many situations, the surface of an area body is subjected to a distributed load. Some examples can be, you can imagine a sign with wind pushing up against it. You can imagine fluid hitting a surface, or you can just imagine weight of an object that's on top of a body surface. When we think about this, we can think about pressure. In this example, we see that the pressure along the x-axis changes from the initial origin point to the end of it. We see that from what we know pressure is force over area, which makes sense in the units here where we have newtons over meters squared. And we know that the pressure here is changing because just visually we can see that the force acting on the x-axis varies from one location to another location. But one thing that we do know is that the area that is being affected is not changing, just the force. And in a way to simplify it, we will analyze the most common case of distributed loading. This is a uniform load across one axis of a flat rectangle body. The reason why we're simplifying this from the 3D version to a 2D version is because, like we said before, the area isn't changing. All that's really changing is the force along it. So what you can do here is, well, if you notice in the previous image, the area was x-axis, and then we see that on the 3D version there was also a b length, so it was b times x gave you the area. But if we take out b, which is constant, which is the width here, we can make it into a 2D problem where we use the term, instead of p, we have p times b gives us w, which w is in terms of force over meter. So you're kind of extracting that width and just leaving it as a constant. So we can consider the length of an element dx and the force of the magnitude acting on it. And it's given by this equation here, where the change of the force is equal to the force per length times the change in the length. We can find a resulting magnitude here, or a net force, by using some calculus where we have the overall change in the length L using integral w of x dx is equal to the area A, which makes sense when we think about how algebra works. When you're normally taking an integral, you're taking the area under a curve. In this case, the curve is showing the different magnitudes of force here. the force can be found as. Because if you imagine in the top image, you see the magnitudes of the force. At the origin, you see the longest force. At the end of the x-axis, you see the smallest force. If instead of how we normally imagine just area, instead of imagining it as force just as a normal problem of finding area under a curve, you can see how it correlates to finding force, where the resultant force just becomes the total area that is occurring under that curve. In order to find the location of where this force is occurring, we can create a equation using moment, because from previous problems we knew that to find a moment you use a distance times the force. In this case, we're saying that the moment around the origin is equal to the distance x times the resultant force. And if in this case you solve for x, you can find that you just have to do x times that w function we have, taking an integral of that over the resultant force, where we find that the length x is located at the geometric center, or the centroid of the area of loading. This kind of works off of what we learned in chapter 4.8, where you can reduce multiple forces into one force and find its location on a plane, but in this case it's just a linear location using moment. This will become more clear when we look at some examples. So our first example, determine the magnitude and location of the equivalent resultant force acting on the shaft. And they give us that the function for this curve is w, which is 60x squared newton meters. And they give us that the largest force acting on this all the way at the end of the beam is 240 newton meters. We can first find the resultant force, which is just the integral of the curve that they're giving us in order to find the area, or the resultant force acting under it. So you take the integral from 0 to 2 meters of the function of the curve, and what you end up getting is that the resultant force is 160 newtons. To find the location, we just use what we had from the moment equation. What it gave us was basically x times that initial function that they gave us. Take the integral of that, and then you divide it by the resultant force. So the top of the equation, we have x times that initial resultant force, which is what we normally find for moments, x times the resultant force, and then you divide that by the resultant force that you had. In this case, the final answer, we get 4x. The length from the origin is 1.5 meters. Now, before I mentioned that the location for the resultant force is usually at the geometric center, the centroid, I know that sometimes we miss these terminologies in geometry, so I'm going to go over this real quick. So the centroid is the geometric center. It is the center of mass of a geometric object, and the common shapes that we will be looking at will be either triangles and rectangles, some other things that you might see maybe trapezoids or semicircles or other things. But commonly for a triangle, just try to imagine what the center of a triangle is. The way you find this is by going from one point to the triangle to the midway point on the opposite side. And you do that for all points, and you find the center of the triangle. For a right triangle, we see that if you're going from the right angle side, it is a distance of b over 3. If you're going from the other way, it's 2 over 3, and that would be the distance away from whatever point you're looking at. For a rectangle or a square, it's a lot easier. You just need to find the midway point for the whole length. So if we're saying that the x-axis is the length of b, it's just b over 2. For the triangle, depending on which direction you're coming from, the whole length of the side is b. It's either b over 3 or it's 2 over 3 times b. This is important because this can allow you to find a location for resultant force if they don't give you an equation for the curve that's acting on a loading. We can take a look at an example of this. In this problem, we're given distributive loading where we see that the pressure, which is P, equals 800 x pascals, acts over the top of a beam. They ask us to determine the magnitude and location of an equivalent resultant force. So here we can multiply that original pressure equation, which was 800x, times the width that they gave us, which was 0.2, to get 160x newton meters. And now that we have the actual equation, the line with this for the distributed load, we can use the integral, and we can use from 0 to 9 of that W equation we found to get a final resultant force of 6,480 newtons. In terms of finding its location, since this is a triangle, we know that the base was 9 meters, and you could either immediately determine that it's the 9 meters taking away a third of the 9 meters to get the location, or you can just do 2/3 of the 9 meters to get the location. But either way, the distance from the origin is 6 meters. And this allows you to determine a location without needing to use the actual equation. This is why a centroid or understanding centroids is very helpful for answering these types of equations.